Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us again for another special webinar. We are joined today with special guests from the CRA to present how to use the new federal hiring subsidy. As a few more people filter in, here are a few things to note about the GoToWebinar platform. The webinar panel is a blue or orange flower icon on your screen. Click that and you'll see the handouts pane. Here you'll find today's presentation available for download. The questions pane allows you to enter your questions for our panelists, and we try to answer as many as we can throughout. Following the webinar, please take a moment to complete a short survey to let us know your experience today, and tomorrow you can expect to receive a recording of this session by email. And with that, I will now introduce Laura Jones, our Executive Vice President and Chief Strategic Officer. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you so much, Alexa, and welcome everyone to the 53rd in our regular webinar series that we've been holding throughout COVID, where we try to get you the information you need on what's happening with government programs and restrictions, and now the lifting of restrictions. And so today we're really pleased to focus on the new federal hiring subsidy. It also, I plain languaged it into the federal hiring subsidy, but it does have, of course, an acronym, the CRHP, so the Canada Recovery Hiring Program. So CRHP, a new acronym to add to the alphabet soup of COVID-related programs that we have, or if you want to be plain language about it, just the federal hiring subsidy, which is what I'm calling it. So we're going to spend most of our time today on that. I'll go over a little bit of what's new, but I first want to just welcome everybody. For our regulars, you know, we love having you back. And for anyone who might be joining us for the first time, welcome. And we'll get right to our content. So on the next slide, I'm Laura Jones. I'm the Executive Vice President and Chief Strategic Officer, which means I do a little bit of whatever is needed at CFIB. And I'm joined today by Rachel, who is our, her fancy title is the National Affairs Manager of Member Information and Escalations. But she's really Chief Problem Solver and answer finder for our members. And also Alexa, who you heard in the introduction, who does a fabulous job on the back end of these webinars. And Corinne is taking a well-deserved break this week, for those of you who might be wondering where she is, and but she'll be back with us again soon. We're also joined by some folks from National Revenue, including Jeremy from the Minister of National Revenue's office, so I'll introduce him in a moment. Randy is back, so nice to have Randy back. He was with us a number of webinars ago to help navigate some of the questions on CEWS and some of the other programs. And Gary and Miguel will be joining us. So you have a cast of folks from CRA to help answer questions on the new Canada Recovery Hiring Program. And so we'll get to them in just a moment, but I thought first we'd just do a really quick update on some of the other new things that are happening. So if we go to the next slide. Oh, before we go to the next slide, I know what I wanted to do first is typically I start with some quotes, and today my quotes come from you, our members, and the one on the left is one that I saw very, very early in the pandemic and took a photo of. I just love all the notes and signs on business owners' doors, which to me were a really important part of what happened during the pandemic. Early in the pandemic, when we were all kind of shocked by the new reality, these notes sort of said, you know, we're closed for at least a couple of weeks to keep our customers and our staff safe, and we see you soon. And it was sort of a way of communicating. And then there were, you know, as the pandemic progressed, different signs, of course, on doors and on poster boards and outside of stores. And this one, after every storm comes a rainbow, I saw and took a picture of early in the pandemic, and I've been waiting for the right moment. It hasn't felt like the right moment yet, and I feel like that moment is coming. I know for business owners in Ontario in particular, you're still right in the thick of it, and certain sectors are right in the thick of it, but it does feel like the storm part of it is passing. I also know for our members that the storm is only part of it. after the storm also comes the cleanup. But I think we're still relieved to be through the worst of the storm, knock on wood. So I liked that one. And then the other one is we get into, particularly in the West, we're into some of the navigating a new normal with mask rules now not mandatory in BC and Alberta. I think there's some new transition issues, and I love this choose kindness from a shoe store, which is kind of cute. So those are my quotes for today's webinar. And with that, let's go to the next slide. So this is where we talk a little bit about what's new. I'm going to get Rachel to come up and join me for the budget bill passing, because there's a few details here that you want to be aware of that we'll run through quickly on the CEBA applications. Rachel, I'll turn it to you for this part of it, and then I'll just run through quickly the rest of it.
Yeah, for sure. We all know CEBA has been a huge program that a lot of you guys have been using. And so you should be aware that it's kind of winding down at this point. We're not really seeing any possibility for extending the program. So you should know that June 30th of 2021, which has already passed, that was the date that you had to submit your application to your financial institution. There are some later dates for uploading documents depending on if you need to requalify into different streams or not. If you still have any issues with these upload documents, because we've heard from you guys that they are super problematic, feel free to call our BR counselors.
Thanks, Rachel. And so that's very quickly some dates there for you if you're in any of these categories. So the financial institution deadline, June 30th, but then there's some other deadlines if you've got paperwork and stuff to get in that are there on the slide. Also, some good news in terms of the CEWS and CRAs being extended until September 25th. However, of course, those rates are now starting to drop. And I know we heard a lot of concern from members on those rates dropping. So although the time for the programs to be in place has been extended, the rates have started to drop, and we continue to advocate for making sure that the right supports are in place to get us through the pandemic. We were kind of hoping that we might see a hold on those rates. That didn't happen a couple of days ago. Those new rates came into effect. And then the other thing I just wanted to mention verbally, it's not on the slide, is if you are in one of those provinces, BC and Alberta right now have, in BC, masks are recommended but not mandatory, and in Alberta, also, they're not mandatory. If you're in one of those provinces, we're hearing a lot from on our helpline around managing that transition with customers, because there are many businesses who still want to have masks kind of mandatory in the business, and certainly that is your right. And you can, our best recommendation is to put up very clear signs saying, maybe because not all of our staff are vaccinated, or we're not all fully vaccinated here, we please request that masks are still mandatory in our business. That's fine. And if you have any questions or you need help with that, please feel free to phone CFIB's helpline. But clear signs are what we recommend. That's our best advice. And with that, turning over to the main topic of today's webinar, which is the Canada Recovery Hiring Program, CRHP, which is plain language, is the hiring subsidy, which is opening tomorrow. And so we're really excited to have some CRA staff here to talk about that, and also someone from the Minister's Office to talk about that. And just before I do that, I'm just going to put some information numbers here. Our commitment, of course, is to keep our website up to date. We do that with questions that come from you. And also, you can call our helpline anytime. Our counselors love talking to you. That's why we're here. So we're here to help you. So please feel free to call anytime. You can also call CRA's business helpline or visit the website. And CFIB, we're constantly in communication with CRA about what's happening, and So, you know, as you call us or call them, you know, we're just know that we're very, very much in communication about what we're hearing from businesses. And then there's a link to the to hiring program calculator there, and we're going to have a run through. I believe Randy's going to give us a run through of that, or Jeremy's going to give us a run. No, Randy's going to give us a run through of that. Sorry, Miguel's going to give us a run through of that. Sorry, I was looking at the wrong name. Miguel's going to give us a run through of that in a moment. Okay, let's get on with the main program here. So on the next slide. Next slide. So just a little, before I introduce our guest, just a little disclaimer that, of course, as you all know, these programs have been delivered in kind of record time. And so sometimes there are things that change about the program. And so all of our guests are going to do their very best to give you the most up-to-date information. But things do change, often in response to feedback that we're getting from you about how we have to change the program. So a little disclaimer there. And with that, I think all the throat clearing is out of the way, and I can introduce our first guest that I'm going to be introducing is Jeremy Belfoy, and he is with the Minister's Office. And so Minister Leboutsier, who we have a very good relationship with, and who, you know, we often are taking your survey results to the minister, and she is looking at that, and she's been a very good partner in terms of being willing to help try to modernize some of the processes and cut some of the red tape. In fact, I think we gave her an award for this a few years back. Doesn't mean there's not lots to do, and Jeremy, you guys hear an awful lot from us on what still needs to be fixed, but we try to do that in a really constructive way, and in a way that's going to work for small business, but also work on your end. And with that, I'm going to turn the floor over to you for a few minutes to bring us some thoughts from the minister.
Thank you, Laura. And yes, we do often hear from you guys, and it's thanks obviously to your members. I'm here today. It's actually my first time doing one of these stakeholder engagements, and I thought it particularly important this time. This is our 9th program at National Revenue, where we're going to be managing, you know, the 9th recovery, sort of a recovery benefit back since we started this in April 2020 with the CERB. And as you may have known from last week, we've extended the wage subsidy, the rent subsidy, and starting tomorrow, businesses will be able to apply for the hiring benefit as well. You know, the minister right now is actually traveling in her own riding on the Magdalen Islands, visiting local businesses. And whenever I'm with her or traveling virtually as well, we're always hearing from local businesses on how important this support has been. And I just want to echo, you know, what Minister Leboutsier has always been saying, as well as Minister Freeland and the Prime Minister, you know, that our government is going to do whatever it's going to take to support Canadian businesses, as well as Canadians, to see us through this pandemic. And to Laura's point, with comments coming from businesses such as yourselves, I definitely want to reiterate that your feedback is definitely valuable. It's important, and it's helped us develop these programs from the very beginning, starting with the wage subsidy, or actually the temporary wage subsidy, to the wage subsidy to what it is today, the rent subsidy, and what we now see today. And to Laura's point, you know, we're moving fast, we're breaking things, and we're continuously looking for feedback and improving these programs. And we're seeing it now as the economy is starting to reopen, depending where you are. Businesses are starting to reopen. We need, you know, these benefits for these hard-hit businesses, and it's really going to help you, you know, rehire staff, hire, you know, maintain your shifts, increase your shifts, or even increase your pay. So as of tomorrow, the application portal will open. And from what I understand, Gary may be able to clarify that, but I believe payments will be delivered as early as July 12th once the applications are processed. So with that, you know, again, I just want to thank you guys for your input, and thought it very fitting to be here today on the 9th program that we're doing to support the economy and small businesses. So thank you, and I'll pass it back to Laura.
Thanks so much, Jeremy. Thanks for being here. And I think our members don't always, you know, they're not necessarily, we're not all experts in the inner workings of government, and but you play a really important role for us in helping get us meetings with the minister, and making sure that, you know, ministers are very busy. So people in your position are often really important to the stakeholder outreach, and having you come and talk to our members, I think was a really nice touch today, because there's kind of the political side of things, and then there's the civil servants we're going to hear from in a minute, who are actually tasked with operationalizing the programs that the ministers bless. So so thank you very much for joining us, and please pass our regards on to the minister, and well, I'm sure we'll be talking to her very soon about what else we need to do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and with that, I'm pleased to introduce Randy, who's going to join us for a high-level overview of the Canada Recovery Hiring Program. Randy, I'm really proud of myself, as you can see, for being able to actually remember that acronym in the acronyms in the soup. And I noticed that we're transitioning from, or I'll make this observation for our members, we're transitioning a little bit from the emergency. There was a lot of E's in those program acronyms initially, CEWS, CERS, the emergency rent, emergency wage, to recovery. And I think this isn't a comment on Randy's making, but this is my editorial observation, that there's a political shift here going on to represent where things are in the recovery. And Randy, I'm going to now turn it over to you for a program overview.
Thank you, Laura, and good afternoon, folks. It's very nice to be with you again to discuss this new Canada Recovery Hiring Program. I'm Randy Hewlett. I'm the Director General with the Legislative Policy Directorate at the Canada Revenue Agency. And at the agency, we're very proud to administer this new program on behalf of the Government of Canada. So the new hiring program and the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, which everyone knows as CEWS, they both support the payroll of eligible employers affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. However, while the CEWS was designed to help employers keep their employees on their payroll during the worst of the pandemic, the hiring program is designed to encourage businesses to hire or rehire employees and grow as the economy recovers. The hiring program supports eligible employers as they grow, whether it's related to hiring staff, increasing shifts, or increasing overall payroll. While the CEWS is calculated based on eligible remuneration paid to eligible employees in a claim period, the hiring program is calculated based on incremental remuneration, which is the increase in the total eligible remuneration paid to active employees in a claim period as compared to eligible remuneration paid to active eligible employees during the base period. And the base period is from March 14th, 2021 to April 10th, 2021. The hiring program will provide a subsidy equal to the incremental remuneration for a claim period multiplied by a fixed subsidy rate. The subsidy rate is 50% for claim period 17 and will gradually decrease to 20% by claim period 22. Importantly, while the CEWS has been available to all for-profit corporations, the hiring program is more focused. For example, in order to be eligible, a for-profit corporation must be a Canadian-controlled private corporation or a cooperative corporation eligible for the small business deduction. Other groups are also eligible to apply for the hiring program, including nonprofit organizations, registered charities, individuals, and certain trusts and partnerships. There are other differences between the CEWS and the hiring program, which are more fully detailed on our website. This is why I encourage anyone who is interested in applying to start by visiting our website, looking at our frequently asked questions and all the information related to our calculator. The hiring program and the CEWS will overlap between June the 6th and September the 25th of 2021. During these 4 overlapping periods, eligible employers can apply for either of the 2 subsidies based on whichever subsidy will provide the higher amount of support. The CRA has developed an integrated calculator that will greatly assist eligible employers in determining which of the 2 subsidies is most beneficial to them. Before I close, I would like to remind you that the CEWS, the Canada Emergency Rent Subsidy, and lockdown support have been extended to September the 25th of 2021. The CRA remains committed to supporting Canadian businesses, just as we have from the beginning of this pandemic, by putting Canadians at the center of everything we do. The CRA is very proud to have supported millions of Canadian workers and businesses to date in accordance with the principles of our People First philosophy. Thank you. I'll now turn it over to Gary Graves.
Okay, there we go. Sorry. I wasn't sure how to unmute myself. Apologies for not coming on camera today. I ended up with a stomach flu, I think, on Saturday, and I lost 10 pounds over the last 3 days. So just bear with me as I get through this presentation. So thank you, Randy. I'm Gary Graves, the acting manager in the Business Returns Directorate with the Assessment, Benefit, and Service branch. The CRA has developed and launched an online calculator, as Randy had mentioned, to help applicants understand how to access the hiring program. The single calculator integrates the CEWS and the hiring program calculations, and the calculator will automatically show applicants which of these 2 subsidies provides more support for them, and based on the information that they input or enter into the calculator. The calculator also includes printable spreadsheet and statement features that employers can use to view their claim at a glance and enter required information into their hiring program or CEWS application forms easily. We will provide a full calculator demonstration later on in the briefing, I believe by Miguel. Similar to the CEWS, eligible employers will be able to apply for their hiring program using CRA's My Business account or represent a client, and applications for the hiring program will be available online as of tomorrow, July 7th, 2021. And we will begin to process those applications starting on July 11th, 2021, with the first payments being issued the week of July 12th. The CRA has added additional checks and validations to the hiring program application to make sure that only those applicants who are entitled to the hiring program will receive it. And for this reason, the hiring program will have an automated validation system that will compare the claimant's amounts against a number of key validations. Applications that pass CRA's automated validations will receive their direct deposit payments within 3 to 5 business days, and applications that do not pass will be manually reviewed before they receive a payment. The time frame for manual reviews will vary based on the extent of validation required, but it is expected that the majority of validations will be completed within 10 days. We want to ensure Canadians have the information they need to get their applications right the first time. On the CRA's hiring program webpage, eligible employers can find detailed information on how the program will work, who can apply, and how the claim periods will be structured. And we understand that circumstances may change, or Canadians may realize that they've made an honest mistake. And for this reason, applicants will be able to amend their applications through My Business account or represent a client in the near future. So if you can't find an answer you're looking for on our website, the CRA's business call centers will remain open from 8 to 8 Monday to Friday, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., as well as Saturdays from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. in order to answer employers' questions. The CRA, in development of the new calculator, the CRA has engaged key stakeholders, and in particular, I would like to thank the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, as well as Restaurants Canada, the Canadian Payroll Association, and CPA Canada. Input from your organization and other stakeholders continue to be a vital and an important element to the success of the COVID-19 economic measures that CRA is delivering on behalf of the Government of Canada. And I thank you for your time today, and I will now pass the floor back to our moderator, Laura Jones at the CFIB.
Thanks so much, Gary, and we hope you are feeling better soon. Miguel, I'm going to ask you to join us and you're going to run through the calculator, and then we're going to get to some questions. There are already some good questions coming in through our question line here, but I'll turn it over to you to run through the calculator and maybe give people a sense too of, I think with some of the other programs, the advice was go through the calculator first. So if you could talk about that and a little bit about the applications and when those will be available, that would be useful, I think, for our audience.
Yes, thank you, Laura. I'm happy to be here today to walk you through the calculator. I'm Miguel Borges Portes. I'm one of the leads on the online calculator development. Before we get to the calculator, though, I just want to bring you to the main page of the CRHP, just to show you that we've tried to structure the CRHP as much as possible like the wage subsidy. So it should look familiar. There's a similar navigation pattern, and you can get a lot of the answers to your questions in these pages. In fact, the first page you might want to see when you have a moment is this compare the CRHP and the CEWS page. We won't go through it today, but there's a lot of comparisons here that we've tried to make easy to understand, just to know what the differences are. And I guess the big one at the top is you can only apply for one or the other during each of the claim periods, but we're expecting businesses to switch from one to another in a future claim period when the rates benefit your business's situation. So skipping over some of the more in-depth details that I encourage you to read when you have a moment, we're going to jump to the calculator itself. Both on the CEWS page and the CRHP page, there's a calculate page in the navigation, but it's here to link you to the shared calculator. There's one calculator that's there to support you to calculate both your CRHP and CEWS for the period, and it will help you decide which one to apply for. So before we move on from this page, there's a short step-by-step just to help you understand what the steps are to calculate and then go to apply. And then there's also an expandable section below to understand a bit more about the math, the calculations behind the hiring program. And you can see, for example, the rates that Randy described earlier today and how they change by period. So let's go to the calculator, which I'll walk you through with an example today. This is outside of the navigation system, but there is a navigation here at the top just to help you get to either program, depending on which one you need more information for. Like before with the CEWS, there's an optional checklist at the top to make sure you've understood the key concepts, have everything you need so that you can complete the calculation in one sitting. That's particularly important on the online calculator because you can't save your data here. The online calculator is just a tool online to help you do those calculations before bringing them over to the application form. If you do need to complete the calculation over multiple sittings, or if you have a lot of employees, we encourage you to use the downloadable spreadsheet, which you can save, and it also facilitates copy pasting employee data in future periods. Today, we're just going to walk you through the online calculator, and feel free to ask questions at the end about either. And you'll note that the design is a bit different. We've taken the opportunity with the introduction of the CRHP to also improve some of the issues that we we're seeing just in the flow of the content on the old calculator page. I guess the first one to mention is just that we've put the calculation right at the top, the calculation spreadsheet right at the first step. And that's to make it easy to find, and also so that you can go straight to the application form once you fill out the spreadsheet. You don't need to come back to the calculator like before. So the online calculator is just if you're doing it online, and the first step is to select the period that you're applying for. As you can see at the top here, the period 17 and forward will have both options for the CEWS and CRHP. After period 20, it will just be the CRHP, but that's not yet updated on the website. So there will be a launch of the periods 21 and 22 later on in the summer. And the periods up to 16 for the CEWS are still available in the calculator. I believe period 10 just closed recently, but the other periods are still open to apply for. So today, since we want to walk you through the CRHP, we're going to use period 17 as our example, and we're going to continue to look at the revenue drop. The revenue drop is essentially this exact same thing as it was for the CEWS. It's a CEWS revenue drop that you're going to calculate a CEWS rate from, and it will also check if you have the required threshold, which is you need to have a revenue drop over 0% in period 17, and then over 10% in the future periods to qualify for the programs going forward. So we're just going to use the year-on-year method, or the comparison with the pre-crisis equivalent month. And for the purpose of this example, we're just going to keep the numbers simple and have a business that had a modest 10% revenue drop that gives them an 8% CEWS rate. Moving on, there's an important new step here that was introduced to ask about the CRHP. And keep in mind that the calculator doesn't require that you're eligible for the CRHP. There will be some businesses that are eligible for the CEWS, but not the CRHP. And you can simply select no, and the calculator will let you continue to calculate the CEWS only, and it won't ask you any information that's specific to the CRHP. Otherwise, if you are eligible for the CRHP, and there are some links here to help you make that decision if you're not sure if you're eligible for the CRHP, so please read through that when you get to that step. And there's an extra step for the CRHP. In fact, it's just the one extra step, so there's not too much more that needs to be done for the CRHP when you're doing a calculation. But it will be a bit more involved in period 17 when you're calculating it for the first time. After that, you can actually use the same numbers, because the calculation here is for a base period for the CRHP. It's how we're comparing your incremental revenue with the new claim periods. And once you have that March 14th to April 10th information, the base period remuneration and active eligible employees, you can just enter those in these fields in future periods, and hopefully that will go very quickly. Since we're calculating this for the first time, I'm going to click on this link, which is going to bring us to a new tab. And this is a standalone calculator, and it's meant to bring you outside of the main calculator, since you only need to do this calculation once, and it just requires you to put in your period 14 of the CEWS, or March 14th to April 10th employee data, and it will calculate your eligible base remuneration for the CRHP. So there's a bit more of a description on how that works. At the top, we emphasize you only need to calculate that once, and then there's an employee form field that you'll be familiar with from the CEWS calculator. So in this example today, we're just going to have one employee here called Mike, and Mike's been with the business since back in March, actually since before the pandemic. So before the pandemic, he was making $500 a week, and for this example, we're just going to say he's continued to make $500 a week through until period the March 14 to April 10th period. So you'll notice that there's a summary for Mike. He has calculations there for his eligible revenue, and you can add more employees if you need, And then there's a button at the end here that we're encouraging you to save your summary. And this will give you two important numbers, the active eligible employees and the CRHP base period remuneration. So that $2,000 and one employee is the data that we want to bring back to this step where we were before. And you'll be using that for the CRHP base period going forward from period 17 to 22. So once we've completed that step, we can continue, and the rest of the steps are very similar to what you would have seen in the CEWS. The main difference is that there's an extra bit of information here for the CRHP. So let's put Mike back in. Mike is still working for us in period 17, which is the claim period we're applying for right now, which is from June 6th to July 3rd. And as before, he was making $500 in average pre-crisis pay. And we've actually started paying him more because the recovery is progressing and he's working more hours. And we've increased his weekly remuneration to $1,000. So in the summary here, you can see that Mike is getting a calculated CEWS amount, and this works the same as the CEWS until now. And there's also an eligible remuneration amount for CRHP. There's a note here that just describes the fact that the CRHP is calculated for the whole business. So this amount isn't applying the rate yet. You'll only see that in the final summary at the end. So another example I wanted to share with you today, if we add another employee, and let's say the employee is Sarah, and this is a new employee. So the CRHP is also meant to cover new employees that you've hired onto your payroll just recently. And in this case, Sarah's only been hired shortly before period 17 began. She doesn't have a pre-crisis pay because you didn't hire her until recently. But as long as she's at arm's length, that's to say she's not family of the owners of the business, she still qualifies for the program. And you can add them to your employees here. And we can see that she also has a calculated amount, both for the CEWS and for the CRHP. So, of course, you can add more employees. And once you're ready, you can review. It's the same kind of spreadsheet, PDF, or print that you can do to save that employee data. And then you can continue on to finish the final steps of the calculator. Step 5 is the premiums, contributions, and deductions. This is only for the CEWS. It's the same as in previous CEWS period, and it does not affect the CRHP. So for today's demo, we're just going to enter $0 values and continue. And now in front of you, you see the final summary. So the first thing you'll notice is it's focused in on the CRHP tab, which is giving you an amount of 3,000 compared to an amount of 640 there for the CEWS. You can only apply for one program during a claim period. And during this claim period, there's an alert here that's telling you to apply for the CRHP as it results in the higher subsidy for this claim period. So if you look here, there are line numbers, and these line numbers are the exact same things you'll find in the application form once you log into My Business account. And you can see a quick calculation of how much you will get for the CRHP. And the basics of how it works is that it looks at your current, that's period 17 remuneration for the CRHP. This is what you paid both Mike and your new employee, Sarah. It subtracts the base period remuneration, which is what Mike was making back in March and April 2021. And then we're multiplying that by a fixed CRHP rate. And that's that rate. There was a table earlier. I can show it again. Here, it's on the calculate your amount page, and it will change slightly in the different periods. But that rate is fixed for the CRHP, unlike the CEWS, where it depends on your revenue drop. So the CRHP and the CEWS will often depend on your revenue drop, which one is greater. And I'll show you that in a moment. So before we go back to change the revenue drop, there's a print preview button. You can see all those amounts and print them or save it for your records, and also to copy those values off to the form. And then there's a how to apply button for the program that you're on the tab for. So this will bring you back to that navigation we had at the very beginning for the CRHP to the how to apply page, and it will guide you through the steps to go to your business account and enter those values in there. So the CEWS amount here is lower. It will just tell you at the top that you should apply for the CRHP this period. But if we went back and changed the revenue drop, in this case, the revenue drop was very small. It was just 10%. But we're going to change this so that the business had actually a 90% revenue drop, which gives them its max CEWS rate for period 17, which would be 75%. And then we can go back to the final summary with the same employee data for Mike and Sarah. And you'll see now that the summary's changed. So there's at the top, it will now advise to apply for the CEWS because that's the higher amount, and it will default to the CEWS tab, and you'll have your print preview and apply for the CEWS in the final summary. So that's the calculator. We've tried to, as much as possible, keep that comparison front and center so that you know easily which one is giving you the better rate. And that concludes the calculator demo. So I'll pass the presentation back to Laura.
Thanks so much, Miguel. That was really helpful. And I think we're going to pull Randy up, and I think Rachel's going to help us out with, I believe we're at the part of the presentation where we're dealing with questions, Rachel. And so Randy and Miguel, if you want to stay on, you're welcome to, because you may have some good answers to these questions as well. So I thought we would start with a question on, like, let's start at the top here and work our way down to some of the more specific questions. But just on the eligibility, one of you mentioned, I think Randy, it was you, that you have to be a CCPC to be eligible. And Joanne is asking, how do you determine if you are a CCPC? Her company is incorporated in British Columbia, and one of its directors is a Canadian resident. And so she's just wondering, you know, is that enough, or how does she determine? How do you determine that part of the eligibility? Because that's kind of one of the basic high-level criteria.
Yes, this is a very important feature of this new program, which is different from the previous wage subsidy program. Here, you must be a Canadian-controlled private corporation. That determination is going to be a question of fact, but on the face of it, obviously, control. So, whoever owns the corporation, are they Canadians? And so you'd have to look at the share ownership and determine that. And we have lots of information on our website in various places on how to determine control. But for small business, I would suggest to you that if this small business is already claiming the small business deduction, they would probably know that, and they would know that they're perhaps a Canadian-controlled private corporation, which is also, for the small business deduction, is one of the main criteria, that they be Canadian controlled. But really comes down to a question of fact. But I would really suggest that they take a look at their previous T2 return, and they probably already have the answer right there.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. It sounds like she likely is. And so eligible, hope that helps Joanne. The second big question, Rachel, we're getting a lot of these, I think, is on eligibility is, if you kind of were in that category, if you weren't eligible for CEWS, are you eligible for this program? And I know you're using the same rails for this program as you did for CEWS, but new businesses in particular, those businesses that started in March or later who weren't eligible for some of these programs are asking that question. So can you help us a little bit with, just repeat again on the eligibility criteria? What happens if you're a new business? Is the CRHP open to you, or are you in the same situation you were in with CEWS?
So you'll see there on your screen that Miguel is showing the eligibility criteria, which is detailed in our calculator. And one of the main criteria is that, like it was for the CEWS, you had to have had a payroll account on March the 15th of 2020. Now, there are certain exceptions for if someone was using a payroll service provider or if they had an asset acquisition. So I would suggest to you that if you weren't eligible under the CEWS because of this rule, you're not likely to be eligible under the Canada Recovery Hiring Program either.
Yeah, and that's nothing that Randy or Miguel or any of their team can do anything about, but just as an editorial comment on my part as a CFIB representative, we know we've heard a lot from these businesses, and we continue to advocate for you with respect to these programs. The big challenge is that the tracks for these programs were laid down, and finding a new almost like infrastructure architecture to do it is one of the challenges that we face. One of the things we hear when we're talking to the political side of the operation, but just to let those members know that we continue to advocate. And if there is an election, there's a lot of election talk in the air. Of course, these are the kinds of commitments that we would look for from parties. Rachel, another one that's coming up a lot, I think, and you might have something to add for this. So Randy and Miguel, you're basically saying with CEWS and the CRHP program, you have to pick a lane on the highway that you want to be in, but you can change lanes, but you can't be in more than one lane at once. And I think you've made that fairly clear. We're not getting questions on that, but we are getting questions about what about the other programs? So what about, for example, there was one, Rachel, I think, asking about the Alberta program.
The Alberta Now, the Canada Summer Jobs Program.
Yeah. Leslie asking about Alberta Jobs and the CRHP. So more broadly, provincial programs and the CRHP. What should our members know about that?
So that's a very interesting question, and it's a good question. It came up a lot during our previous sessions on the CEWS. And the important thing to remember here is that when it comes to the CEWS or the Canadian Recovery Hiring Program, there is no provision that requires an employer to reduce the amount of the eligible remuneration if they're also benefiting from another hiring program. The key is, of course, is the employer has to be paying the remuneration, so they can be double dipping, for lack of a better word, from two different programs, and it wouldn't have a negative impact on the Canada Recovery Hiring Program. Now, there are requirements for reduction of the CEWS when it comes to certain work sharing programs and things like that. I don't have that information available, but you can benefit from two programs without necessarily having a negative impact on your the amount you would be eligible for.
So from what I understood, that means we're clear to go. But I'm really glad you mentioned the work share program because Jennifer actually mentions, does that impact their Canada Recovery Hiring Program subsidy?
Yeah, so I think the work sharing programs, there's a calculation that you have to go through under the CEWS. I'm waiting from a signal here from one of my colleagues online with me how it impacts directly the Canada Recovery Hiring Program. But you know, I do want to caution your members as well that just because you might not be adversely affected under the Canada Recovery Hiring Program by the amount of a provincial subsidy you might get, that doesn't mean the provincial subsidy won't require you to reduce it because of the Canada Recovery Hiring Program. So my comments are only with respect to the federal program. And I know there's, you know, our calculator, if you have amounts under a work sharing program, the federal work sharing program, if you go through the calculator and you go through the step-by-step, you reduce it, you put the number in there, and the number will calculate how it impacts upon that particular, you know, the amount of the subsidy you can claim. But the important thing to remember is provincial labor subsidy programs that might be pandemic related don't reduce the amount of your Canada Recovery Hiring Program or your CEWS remuneration. But there is a particular issue in here with respect to amounts under the federal work sharing programs.
And just to be clear for our members too, the applications for this are open tomorrow, but this calculator that you will use to help you with your application is available now on your website.
Yeah, so, and the other thing is, even though the applications are open now, it has to be for remuneration that you can't make a claim until the remuneration is paid for the particular claim period. So doesn't mean you have to rush. Obviously, there's cash flow issues for businesses. So for amounts that are paid, obviously they make their claim, but make sure they're paid before you make your claim, because you don't want to have to be amending your claim too many times, because that could obviously create delays as well.
That's a very good, important tip. I think make sure that you've paid before you make the claims to avoid any possible amendments. I think that's a
well,
very...
that's actually a must. That's a legislative requirement. It must
Yes.
be paid before you make the claim. But what I'm saying is, you wouldn't want to make a claim for a claim period, only claim 2 periods or 2 weeks within the claim period, and then make a claim later for another 2 weeks. That'll create delays. You might be better off just waiting until everything related to that claim period is paid and then making your claim.
Great. Okay. Another kind of related question here on, at least on eligibility, is do employees currently on CERB or CRB qualify? That's Nathan's question.
But that's kind of an interesting question. So I'll make the first point. If you're on CRB or CERB, it means you're not being paid by your employer. So there's no eligible remuneration for your employer to claim. Now, if someone is coming off CRB or CERB and then going back on the employer's payroll, obviously the employer can claim, because it's an increase in the eligible remuneration. And part of the design of these programs, obviously, is to wean employees off these other programs, and for the employer to get them back on the payroll and get the economy going, and the employer to be able to make the claim. So if they're on those programs during a claim period, the employer is not really paying anything, so he wouldn't have any eligible remuneration.
So just something to add to that one, because I know that the CRB and the CERB in the past and currently do allow you to receive some sort of employment income to a maximum of, I think it's a 38,000 for CRB from an employer before it becomes taxed or before it kind of mimics that EI return to work model. So from what we know, it does seem that some workers can potentially benefit from both.
Yeah, of course. Like if you're in a situation where the employer is actually paying the employee wages as well, but they're under that threshold to still benefit from these other programs, they wouldn't be considered ineligible because of that. So the key is that remuneration has to be paid by the employer. So, if they're otherwise eligible for those programs and the employer is not paying any remuneration, there's nothing to claim. If they're under that threshold and the employer is actually paying them something, then obviously that would factor into the employer's calculation, but it would have to be determined if there's actually an increase over the baseline remuneration period as well. So there's a lot that factors into it, but they wouldn't be rendered ineligible just because of that, but the key is the employer has to be paying them.
Great. Rachel, do you have any in your box that you are anxious to ask? Because I know you've been reviewing the questions as well.
I think a lot of members, I know there was a lot of confusion with the CEWS as far as arm's length versus non-arm's length. And I was hoping that, Miguel, do you think you could kind of go to the section where it talks about which employees qualify, so that we can kind of just take a look at exactly what Randy has been kind of talking about. There's this emphasis on what who is an eligible employee and what is eligible incremental remuneration, right? There's a lot of technical terms flying around. But yeah, if you can kind of speak to the difference in this program, that would be great, Randy.
Sure. So Miguel has the information up there that gives you the basic information on non-arm's length and arm's length employees. And the short answer is, for this program, it's the same as it was for the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy. So employers would be familiar with the rules from the previous program. And another important point to remember is that non-arm's length employees, they do qualify for this program, but obviously there's a special calculation and special rules that come into effect in determining what that baseline remuneration will be, up to certain maximums, and it also comes into play in determining what the eligible remuneration is for the claim period. So, I mean, there are calculations, and that determination is important. But again, you know, without getting into the really technical details of the rules, we've taken a lot of the guesswork out of this for employers, and we have the information you know, in our calculator that will navigate or help employers navigate their way through this. So
Thanks,
this
Randy.
calculator is quite enhanced, in my view, from previous versions, and you know, we're always looking to even make it better. So if anyone has any suggestions, including obviously the CFIB, we'd be happy to take those into consideration.
Yeah, we've been doing a lot of work with Miguel and his team on giving feedback on the way that this is laid out, and it looks much better. And you should know that I've seen a couple questions come up where there's asking if there's a spreadsheet. There is still a spreadsheet, right, Miguel? That businesses can use. I think we should kind of revisit these, because we talk about base periods, baseline periods, pre-crisis periods, and I think it can kind of get a little bit confusing. So we have a couple members. Claire is asking if we can kind of specify what those different, I think there's 3 particular periods that we need to be aware of. I don't know if you can clarify that, Randy.
I'll try my best here. So obviously the claim period is the most important period. That's the period in which you're claiming the subsidy. So that's important. And you have to determine what your eligible remuneration is in the claim period, and compare that to your baseline remuneration for the previous year, depending upon which particular rule you fall into. And also unique to this particular program, because it is based upon incremental remuneration, you have to compare the current remuneration for the claim period to the remuneration for the baseline period. And those periods move, not the baseline remuneration period, but the claim period obviously moves. So, but again, I'll say that you know, the team has done a great job on the calculator in its design. And as soon as you select the claim period for which you're making the claim, if you follow the steps correctly, this will guide you through every step of the process in determining, you know, how to determine your revenue and your revenue decrease in comparison to your baseline revenue period, and how to determine your current remuneration for the claim period, and inputting the amount for the baseline period. So it's all in the calculator.
Great. So we're just getting a little close to time. For those who join us regularly, you know that when there are lots of questions, I tend to skate a little over time to get in as many as possible, but we're starting to get to that time. So I'm going to sneak a few more in, but I also, so one of the ones I wanted to make sure we get to is Jeff's question. What if because a couple people had the same question, what if our business was forced closed during the base period for the CRHP? So I'm assuming the revenue loss then would be just higher. That's how it would affect things. But Randy, what would you say to Jeff about what if our business was forced closed during the base period?
Yeah, so for those businesses that are closed during the base period, there's the impact upon the revenue decrease. So, but there's also the impact upon incremental remuneration. So you may not have been paying employees as well during the period you're closed. So then obviously you have a higher incremental remuneration. But if you were paying employees the same amount during the base period as you're paying them during the claim period, you have no incremental remuneration. So regardless of your revenue, of what happens on the revenue side, you're not going to have a claim. You may have a claim under the CEWS in that particular case. But the important thing is incremental remuneration is such an important consideration in determination of the amount of your subsidy.
Yeah. Now, there's just we're getting so many great questions, and we know whenever there's a new program launched, this is the case. There's a lot to work out. Sorry, go ahead, Randy.
Yeah, just let me make one more point here that I haven't mentioned yet. Furloughed employees, so that would be employees that are laid off but continuing to be paid, don't qualify under the Canada Recovery Hiring Program. So if you're in a situation where you have temporarily laid employees off but you continue to pay them, they wouldn't qualify under the Canada Recovery Hiring Program, but they would qualify up to period 20, I believe it is, under the CEWS. So you might be better off under the CEWS in that particular case as well. So that's an important consideration that should be factored into the previous response I gave.
Great. And again, the calculator, I think there was a question on whether the calculator helps you know whether to use CEWS or the new CRHP, the subsidy for new hires. I did a pretty good job of remembering it for most of the webinar, Rachel. The CRHP program. And the answer to that is yes, right, Miguel? Like that, they have those two amounts, and you can see which one you would be better off using. But,
exactly. So,
and to be clear, you can only use one or the other. Again, I'm going to repeat that because this is new, and so people are confused, right? You can use one or the other. You may be able to use it with a provincial program as well, but you need to check with the provincial qualifications. Did I miss anything there, Miguel?
Let me just jump in quickly there because there's a legislative requirement here. So the calculator does what it does, and it tells you which is the higher amount, and you claim the higher amount.
Yeah.
But legislatively, you must claim the higher amount. So that's just the way the law works. And if they're equal, you actually got to claim the CEWS. So that's the way the legislation works. The calculator is designed for ease, and I just, human behavior being what it is, I just don't see anyone claiming a lower amount or trying to claim a lower amount. They're going to claim the higher amount. So we've designed the calculator in such a fashion that it just provides you with that information. Correct, Miguel?
Exactly. Thank you, Randy.
And that's another reason why we've worked so hard to make sure that every summary can be kind of printed, every calculation can kind of be printed so that you can keep that in your records as well within the calculator, just so that you have like that tip that Laura always says to keep everything in a little journal or document everything. That's super key at this time. I did want to sneak in one last question that you haven't really touched on today, Randy. A lot of people are asking about comparative years. So when you're calculating your revenue drop, I know in CEWS period 5, you were able to switch from comparing year over year as opposed to comparing using the January, February. Is there an opportunity to do that with this new program?
So the short answer to that is no. One of the hallmarks of the CEWS and the CRHP is consistency in determining your revenue. So the selection you make, is the selection you make, and so you must follow it. So if you made a selection for your CEWS and determining your CEWS, then that's the selection you have to live with for the Canada Recovery Hiring Program. As you noted, Rachel, I just don't have the period in front of me now. I believe there was at one point in time when the rules had changed or there was additions of periods, there was an opportunity to switch, but once you elected into that, then you had to stick with it. So important for people to know that if you're using this particular program, then the elections that you might have made under the CEWS, they stick with you for this particular program as well.
And that's been a really fun topic that a lot of our members have really loved learning about, is all these elections, right? Do you know if the same attestation holds true, or I promise this is my last question, or is that being changed for this program?
I think I think the attestation is the attestation. It's going to be the same. Obviously, the application might be structured a little bit differently because the when you're claiming the CRHP, but might just slight modifications. But the attestations you make are generally the same. So those will be my comments. I'm not sure if anyone else from the CRA, Gary in particular, has any more insight on that, but technically under the legislation, the attestation remains the same.
That's correct.
Okay, so two more and I'll ask them together. One is,
well, let's not forget we have another seminar coming up at 2:30. So
yes, one more. Okay, two more quick ones. What is the maximum subsidy per employee under the CRHP? That's Sue Kana's question. And then I just quickly will ask you guys about if we could put on the helpline numbers again for my team. If you could just go back to the one of the first slides, and that way they'll see the CFIB helpline, but also the CRA helpline. But I know that a lot of our members will have in their mind, what are the wait times right now on those helplines? CFIB is in pretty good shape. We're working really hard to stay under our 24-hour turnaround, and we're answering most of our calls live right now. But I know with volumes and new programs that this can change a lot. Randy, do you know what the what people can expect if they're calling the CRA helpline right now?
I think I'll make a general comment. Obviously traffic fluctuates under the helpline, and Gary can jump in here if he has something different. I think the call wait times, most recent information I had, were very good. So it does fluctuate, but it's impossible to say it's this or it's that. But I just know that there's been significant improvements in wait times. In terms of the question on the maximum subsidy, there's no maximum subsidy per se, but there's a maximum amounts per employee that goes into the calculation of baseline remuneration and eligible remuneration. So that's where there would be the limitations on how much subsidy you can get per employee. And I believe that is $1,129 per week for eligible remuneration.
Great. Well, that's my cue, I think, to kind of wrap things up. And typically we just let everyone say just a couple of final words. And so, Randy, I'll turn it over to you first, Miguel, and then Rachel, and just any final thoughts you have for members.
Nothing in particular. Thank you for the opportunity to present. Just one comment really, that the best information available, because these programs are changing. Our information that's available is changing and evolving as we get new questions. The best source of information is obviously our website. So that's where I would direct your members to get their initial information. That would be a better option than even calling our business number right away. So get your background information as much as you can and sort of take it from there. We're always available to help as best we can. So if questions do come in through your organization, Laura, then we'd obviously be open to providing that information. So thank you to your membership and to my colleagues on the line who were feeding me information through a chat function as we went through this presentation. So thank you.
And thank you, Randy, for being available to you and your team. It's great to have you on again. Miguel, any last thoughts from you?
I just want to echo Randy and say there's that compare page for the CEWS and CRHP on the website. So we're hoping that comes in handy to give a quick overview. And if ever there's an answer that you just can't find, although we can't answer you, there's a widget on the web pages where you can leave feedback, and we'll be updating the website whenever we get feedback or notice something that's missing or not there. So we encourage you to leave feedback, but we can action as well.
Great, thank you very much. And Rachel.
Yeah, so I mean, as usual, you have all these great resources that you can get some background information. If you're going through the application, feel free to give our RPR counselors a call, because I mean, we've obviously been going above and beyond for you guys, and we want to continue to do that. And you guys are our source of information on how to make these programs better. So keep feeding that to us. And we'll keep fighting for you guys. And don't forget that documentation and how important it is.
Thanks. And so I'll just end by saying, first of all, big thank you to CRA for all of their work. Also a note, thank you to Rachel. And Rachel is constantly looking at all of the questions. So if we didn't get to your question today, we'll be looking at all of these questions and getting the important ones. Well, they're all important, but getting you answers, and the ones we don't have answers to, we'll be getting to CRA and working to get you those answers. Also, just a thought on, it's kind of nice that we're moving from the emergency phase to the recovery phase, but the recovery phase has its own challenges. It has the rainbow as some consolation, but also its own challenges in terms of cleanup. And we will continue to be here to help with all of that as we move forward with whatever may come tomorrow and next week and the weeks after that. And as usual, we love being here for these webinars for you, and don't hesitate to be in touch through our website, through our email, through our helpline. We're always happy to talk to you. And thank you very much. And with that, we'll call it another webinar. Thanks, everyone.